So they both compute. But they're not the same. Talking about rack versus desktop. So whether you're building your own home lab, maybe you work in a workplace, you're delving around with this sort of stuff, there are key differences between these two sorts of technologies. You sort of know what a desktop computer is, right? There's got ports, but then you got the server range of desktop computers, and then you got the server racks, you got server blades. Then of course you got all the cloud stuff, you got all the virtual stuff. If you want to know more about the virtual side of things, the cloud side of things, there's other videos for that in this channel, but there's also training courses. If you like to learn more about technology, you want to become better at all things tech, you want to know about like interview help, tips and guides and questions and answers on the key interview questions. You want to become an IT manager. You want to know more about security, storage, networking. Down below, I've got Udemy courses there. You can go check them out. They're pretty cheap. So here we got the two systems. The one at the top being our desktop. This is a Dell Optiplex 7050. And the server down the bottom is a rack server, a Dell EMC R640, something that you would find inside of a server room. It's a long server, it's a wide server, and is also considerably heavier than what you'd find a desktop to be. Quite a bit heavier. Most equipment in a server room goes by what's called a rack unit to understand the height or the actual thickness of an actual device. So a switch, a network device, a server goes by a rack unit or an RU. This server is a 1 RU, which is the thickness, that is the smallest RU size. And of course, you can buy a server that is a 2 RU, which essentially is double the thickness of this. Most rack servers or blade servers have got a cover. As you can see right here, you can take this cover off, which of course contains the brand being Dell EMC, but other brands will have the same sort of thing. And then you're actually now exposed to the front of the actual server itself. You can see there available slots for additional devices that you may want to stick inside the server itself. So let's look at the desktop first. So at the very front, you've obviously got a number of ports. We've got 3 USB, older USB ports, including a faster one, and then the USB-C connection. On the server, on the top right, a USB port where you can run USB devices into it. And then on the bottom right, you've got a configuration port. We've actually got a little tag there as well where it says Dell EMC R640. Well, you can actually pull that out, and it has further information about the server, including the serial number. Now, it's important to know the health and the status of your server. So on the left, you've got some status lights there to let you know whether the server itself is healthy. Now, commonly a server isn't hooked up to a screen, but you do have a VGA port on the front when you need to install and troubleshoot. Now, the server does have capacity to actually have some hard drives installed, and some servers you'll actually see the hard drive right at the very front. You'll see 2.5-inch slots, for example, of hard drives. But in my case, I don't have these because I'm actually going to be booting my server against what's called a storage area network, or a SAN. This is running a VMware environment, which is a virtualization technology. So I don't actually need hard drives within my server. So another noticeable difference is the processor. The desktop having a slower processor being a Core i7, which you'll find in laptops and desktops, while the server has a Xeon processor made by Intel as well. And they're going to be a much faster processor. This particular server actually has 2 of them in there as well. On the side of the unit, you'll see that there are some little grooves here, essentially little notches, which is where you actually install the rails for this server. Of course, this server needs to be racked into a cabinet, into a server room. So you're going to install rails on the left and onto the right, and they're going to click into these spots right here. And then the server just sits into there and then slides right into place. Here is the top of the unit. You can clearly see the difference in the size, being a rack unit, being a lot wider, a lot longer than the actual desktop itself. Here's the back of the actual devices just to sort of show you the different sorts of ports that are available. Now, of course, very similar to on a desktop, you can have expandable ports. You can actually add additional devices into that. You can also do the same thing with a server. So it depends on the actual server itself, but you're generally going to have a lot more Ethernet ports. You've got slots for what's called SFP modules. You could have fiber channel. You can have all of these other sorts of connections. We've also got an Ethernet port on the very far left. That's called an iDRAC port for management of the server. Essentially, you can manage the server remotely. Got a comms port, and then right there you can see 4 gigabit or 10 gigabit Ethernet ports. A further 2 Ethernet points there. These are 10 gigabit, and then next to those are 2 slots where you can actually insert other sorts of peripherals, other cables, as well as what's called SFP modules that allow you to have further Ethernet or even fiber channel connectivity. So it is quite common to find servers with a lot of Ethernet points, and that's because we want redundancy, and it's going to be running virtualization technology and multiple VMs. So you want to be able to have VMs split across different Ethernet points. On a server, we want to do redundancy where possible. We want to make sure a server is highly available. So we've got dual powers in here. And of course, we want to run these powers into different PDUs, different power boards, so that you have redundancy. So you can commonly open up a desktop quite easily. And then inside, you may be already familiar with this. Here is a little latch that you lift up. You may need to open it with a key. And that's essentially the actual top panel that you use to then lift up. But here it is, look at all that. There's so much more available within this particular server. And remember I said this is a 1RU server. So if you get yourself a server that is bigger, a 2RU or a 4RU, you can even put more things into there. But you can see the two big heat sinks right there. That's the big metal heat sinks. They are the two CPUs on each side, as well as all of the RAM slots that you can see right there, which are covered by these black covers. Very much similar to what you'll find on a desktop, but this is more RAM that is certified and designed for a server, and you insert the RAM the same way that you do on a desktop. The main difference, of course, is that we have a lot more slots. Higher end servers, you can actually store more, so you can install a lot of RAM into this server and then be able to allocate it to potentially a whole bunch of virtual machines that are in here. So all of this grunt, all of this horsepower needs to be kept cool. So we've got 8 fans in here that are constantly on, keeping the actual unit cool. You will find that a server is considerably louder than a desktop as well, and that's because it has a lot more fans, because there's a lot more processing, a lot more RAM in here, so the fans need to be running really, really fast. Slots available to expand and add additional cards. Now you can see that right here, my 4-port card has actually been added in later on, and then I've got plenty of other slots that are available right there where I can actually expand. And then there's the 2 power supplies for redundancy and for failover. So even if one fails, the server does not go out. The actual server has slotted onto the top of the actual rail, and now we can just literally push it and then to slide it into place and then click it into place within our actual server cabinet, into our rack. We've got some LED indicators on the left there, and then your lock section where you can put in one of those lock keys to lock the front panel. So with the cover taken off, we've got a couple of hard drives. These are SAS drives, easily removable by pushing on that button, slide the drive out. And we've got some additional slots here where I can literally just slide those plastic slots out and add additional hard drives. Now you'll see that these are essentially the back of the unit. This is the back of a server with all of the relevant cabling plugging into it and going into their relevant positions, whether it's the switches, routers, storage units, into other servers, etc. Really, really cool video. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, remember to subscribe, click on the button on the bell. Also training courses galore on all things tech. If you want to know more about technology, interview help, management, security, all of that sort of stuff. Thanks again for tuning in. We'll talk to you on the next video.